And let's get started. Okay, so as everyone can see, we are in a different place. We're actually all in the same building for the first time ever. There's two Chris's, and we have Denise here, which is a new face. You can't really see me waving in the background, but Denise is all of us in one image. And we have a very exciting special episode live from the David Dunlap Observatory. I am going to let our special guest here, Denise, introduce herself and why is she here?
Thank you so much, Samantha. So why am I here? The exciting thing that we're doing today, of course, is visiting the David Dunlap Observatory. And here I am with the big telescope right behind me here. And if you look down on the observing floor, you can see Chris sitting at the desk. Wave, Chris. And you can see, maybe you can see Samantha through the windows there in the warm room. So my name is Denise Chilton. I am the chair of the RASC DDO committee. So this is the committee of RASC Toronto Centre that runs the outreach programs that we offer here at the David Dunlap Observatory in partnership with the city of Richmond Hill. So I'm really happy to be here today as part of this broadcast to help give you guys some great information about the observatory, about its history, about how this great big telescope works, and much more. I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Denise. So in order for us to have lots of Q&A time at the end, Samantha and I decided we'd cover our Messier objects right off the top of the show here and get them out of the way. And then we'll shut down the solarium and get on to the walking around and showing the telescope in action and how we actually use it. So let me share my screen here and bring everybody up to speed on the latest round of Messier.
Well, Chris is getting started. I must apologize. I'm a little behind on getting the website updated. I was busy. I was defending my thesis this morning, which I successfully passed. But I promise everyone that they will be up tomorrow, the list that we discuss here, as well as the clip from this episode. So please forgive me.
Absolutely. So I've got my solarium set up, the special DDO Panorama, which is really, really cool. We use this when we do public events here. We have a room in the other admin building where we have the whole wall filled with stellarium, and we have an immersive space that we can show people the sky with. Right now, what I'm going to do is bring up tonight's sky once it's dark, around 9 o'clock, now that we're on daylight savings time, and bring up the Messier targets. So you can go into stellarium here, and I'm going to bring up just the Messier targets, but then I'm going to do a neat little trick for everybody. So, whoops. So here's the Messier targets. Get that out of the way. So those are the colored symbols that you can see. But I've also got a set of bookmarks. So this actually covers all 4 seasons of the year's worth. And we're just going to focus on the winter targets since we finished spring. And so I'm going to bring up my bookmarks here, my stellarium bookmarks, and highlight the winter bookmarks, the spring Messier objects. So you can see at this time of the year, most of them are still rising in the eastern sky in early evening. And this week, we've got a pretty full moon in the sky. So what I thought I'd do is have everybody tackle some of the brighter objects, and those would be the ones, the open clusters in Cancer, excuse me, and a double star up in Ursa Major. So to start off, we're going to go with, just get my little human Zoom people out of my face, out of my way here. So Messier 44 is here in Cancer. So this is an easy target. It's a bright open cluster. It's naked eye if you have a dark sky, binoculars, any size of a telescope. It's twice the size of the full moon. And it's easy to locate it if you use not the stars of Cancer, which are rather dim, but if you use the star Procyon. So here we have Procyon, and here we have Regulus. So if you gotta split the difference and go a little higher, look for a fuzzy patch in your binoculars, you can pick up the Messier 44, otherwise known as the beehive or Praesepe, which means manger in Latin. And when you're looking at it, you want to use low magnification in your telescope, and you want to look for, you can look for pairs of stars, chains of stars, patterns, and things like that, and try to maybe estimate how many stars there are in the cluster. Now, below that, a little bit closer to that line between Regulus and Procyon is Messier 67. Messier 67 is a little difficult with the naked eye, but binoculars and any size telescope will pick it up. It's about 3 degrees above that midline, that line joining those two bright stars. And you can use the kind of head of Hydra, the snake, too, to find it if you want to do it that way. As I said, it's smaller and less sort of intense or impressive as M44. And so it's going to be a little bit harder to see, but you can look for, again, different types of stars in it. There's actually a golden eye, which gives it its nickname, the golden eye cluster. And the Pac-Man would arise from its shape. So you can check that out. Next one up is we're going to swing over, because we're looking at brighter objects, we're going to swing over and look at M40, which isn't ideally placed at this time of the year, but in the next couple of weeks, it'll be higher and easier to see. And it's up here near the bowl of the Big Dipper. And what you can do is take the inner edge of the bowl from Thecta to Megrez and just carry on a little bit and find that messy object. I think if I bring up my Telrad here, then you can see that you can put your Telrad rings, kind of put the Megrez star in between the two outer rings and pick up this. Now, M40 is unusual. It's actually a double star. We're not sure if it was an accident in Messier's list or a misinterpretation of another object. But anyway, that's what counts, and that's what you're aiming to look for in your Messier certificate, those double stars. While you're there, though, you could look for some other things in the neighborhood. We just bring up some NGC objects here and see if we can pick up. So there are some galaxies in the neighborhood, and it is possible that Messier may have been, actually seeing another one of these galaxies and then, mistabulated the object for M40. So those are the 3 bright objects that you can see this week with the moon in competition. But if you want to get your early start on some of the other objects that are coming up, then what I suggest you do is start working on the brighter galaxies. So what we can do first is head on up to the Dipper area again here and look for M81 and M82. So M81 and M82 are 2 galaxies which are telescope close to one another. So if you use a low magnification eyepiece, you can see them both. And the easiest way to find them is to locate the Big Dipper, which is standing up on its handle in the evening right now, and draw an imaginary line from Thecta to Dubhe, cross the diagonal of the bowl, and double it. And that's, you can put your finder scope on that spot in the sky, and you're almost guaranteed to pick up M81, which is the brighter of the 2 galaxies. So this is visible easily in smaller telescopes. I've seen it in the suburbs from my driveway with streetlights competing, making the neighborhood bright. So it's really, really bright enough for almost anybody to pick it up. It's partly tilted, and that gives it a little more concentration to its light, makes it a little bit brighter to see it. And yeah, you can look for, once you've got M81, then M82 is pretty easy. There's M82. And again, if I put my eyepiece view here, you can see that they'll share the eyepiece in say a 6-inch Dobsonian with a 26 millimeter Plössl lens. Easy to pick them both off. Now you're going to find M82 is smaller, but it's actually fairly bright because it's kind of an edge-on structure, so it's got high surface brightness. And there is actually, it's got some starburst happening in the core. So if you do an image of it or you have a nice dark sky and a big aperture telescope, you can see there's some disruption in the center of the galaxy. Next up that I'd recommend in the short term is going over to the Owl Nebula, which is M97. And M97 is, again, kind of easy to find using the Dipper as your guide. And what you can do is find Dubhe and Merak, which is the outer rim of the bowl, and then drop down here. And if I put the telrads on, here we go. Then you can see you can practically put Merak on the edge of the telrad rings and pick up this planetary nebula. So it's a planetary nebula. It's very small. You can see it's much smaller than the galaxies that were showing a second ago. Bigger telescopes help, or if you have a smaller telescope but very dark skies, you should have no trouble. You will need more high magnification to make it big enough to really make it out. If you have an oxygen 3 filter, it'll brighten the nebula dramatically. And when you're looking at it, see if you can pick up any of the internal structure and get a sense of the eyes in the owl while you're looking at it. So sort of darker zones that resemble the eyes of the owl. So that's M97. And the last one is the Surfboard Galaxy. So there's the Surfboard. Oh, we got a couple more here. Surfboard Galaxy is M108. Nearby, not too far from the Owl Nebula. Again, it's kind of on the way from Merak down to the Owl Nebula. Surfboard Galaxy is better in a bigger telescope or very dark skies for a medium or smaller telescope. It's fairly edge on, so it's got good surface brightness, and try to see if you can see any of the modeled structure when you're observing it. Next up, we have M109. M109 is, again, easy to find using the Dipper stars. You're going to be taking the bottom of the dipper, the base of the bowl, and extending it further under the handle. So start at Merak, go to Phecda, and this one you're seeing another spiral galaxy. It's fainter because it's more open, face on, but so you'll want to, better sky conditions, darker conditions, and a bigger telescope to see that one. But you might be able to pick up some hint of the arms wrapping around. And the last one up for this round is Messier 106, which you can already see is much bigger. And this one is located kind of a little bit of in a kind of a nondescript part of the sky, but you can use that trick of using the Dipper's bowl again. You can start at Duby, go to Phecda, and double that distance. So now you're, instead of going this way to M181, M82, you're going the opposite way down to M106. So it's actually pretty easy to find it in that respect. And again, it's relatively bright. You can look for some structure in the arms, and you can look for these other nearby little galaxies near. So that's the Messier objects, and Samantha will post those for everybody to see, so we can you can chase them down as the nights get darker and darker next weekend onwards. Any questions on any of the Messiers, Samantha, before I put this away?
I don't see any comments on the Messier other than Messier made a mistake. It's merely an optical pair, not an actual binary star system. I'm not quite sure. I might have missed what that was to comment to, but.
Yeah, so the term double star sort of covers both aspects, binary versus line of sight.
Learn something new.
Right.
Okay, if there's any questions for Messier, speak now, forever hold your peace. Okay, we're ready for the main attraction. I apologize for the heater in the background. I'm going to mute myself now.
So I'm going to show a few slides in a PowerPoint, and then we'll get on to walking around the telescope and the observatory a little bit more. So this is the picture of the DDO, the David Dunlap Observatory's dome at dusk. And what we're seeing here is a pathway leading up to the iconic blue doors of the observatory. And that's actually aligned to the North Celestial Pole. So Polaris on a dark night, clear night, is visible right above the shutters of the dome. It's really pretty. So the observatory is in smack dab in the middle of Richmond Hill at 123 Hillsview Avenue in Richmond Hill. If you want to imagine where it is, it's north of 16th Avenue, and it's kind of midway between Yonge Street and Bayview Ave. So it's a park or an undeveloped, largely undeveloped zone. There's now houses on part of the land that has been sold off to development. So why is the DDO not used for science any longer? It's because of this map. This is the light pollution map for the Toronto area. And you can see that the DDO is sitting right up here in this little, where is it here? Near the top of this white blob, which is kind of the edge of the most severe light pollution map. And there gives you an example of where it is. So the encroaching civilization and growth around the Toronto area just made taking spectra with a big telescope very difficult, if not impossible. So Toronto astronomers, U of T astronomers had better telescopes than other parts of the world they could use. A little bit of history. So this gentleman in the upper left here, this is Dr. Clarence Chant. And way back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, he was an astronomer working in Toronto at University of Toronto. In fact, he's kind of the father of Canadian astronomy in that most of the Canadian astronomers that came through in the early 20th century were trained or taught by him. And he was keen to get an observatory built for the U of T research to be done. And so he used to do public lectures in Toronto. When he did, he was doing a lecture on a passing comet in, I think it was 1921 in the city of Toronto. And this gentleman in the lower left was in attendance, and that is David Dunlap. And David Dunlap was not an astronomer. He's a mining entrepreneur. He was mining gold and copper and things like that in Northern Ontario. And he had amassed a bit of a fortune. And so he was quite interested in astronomy, and the two gentlemen got to talking, and David Dunlap said he would be willing to sponsor the construction of the observatory. But unfortunately, in 1924, David Dunlap died before the project could take place, get underground, get off the ground. And so poor Clarence was kind of back to square one until Jessie stepped up. This is Jessie Dunlap, David Dunlap's wife, his widow. And she agreed that funding the observatory and building it in her husband's name would be the best way to go. And that's why it's the David Dunlap Observatory. Denise and I and others, we think it should be the Jessie Dunlap Observatory. Only fair, but that's the way life goes. Denise, why don't you talk a little bit about the construction of the observatory, how that all happened?
Sure thing. So this telescope was actually not built on site. It was built in Newcastle on Tyne in England. And so it was built by the Grubb Parsons Company. And I don't know if you guys can see me. I can't see what you can see. Oh, there we go. So we've got the Grubb Parsons sign right here on the telescope. I can't tell if you can read that, but it's up there.
We can't read it. We can see it though. There's a plaque.
You can see it. Okay, so that plaque right there is the plaque that says Grubb Parsons on it, okay? And so this telescope was actually not built on site. It was commissioned for this site, but it was built in Newcastle on Tyne in England. And then it was completely disassembled, the whole thing, not just the telescope. The entire building was completely disassembled and then shipped via the ocean. It was sent on a ship and then by train to this site in Richmond Hill. So can you imagine? It's like the world's worst IKEA project. It comes flat packed and you have to assemble it on site. In fact, the only parts of this telescope that were actually original to this site, that were assembled here on site only and exclusively, are the concrete piers the telescope rests on. So let me see if I can switch my camera around. Here we go. You guys can see this giant concrete pier right here. This is one of them. And then I think, Chris, do you have the other one in your field of view? Oh. Okay, so Chris has got, oops, I keep switching my camera. Chris has got the other one in his field of view. So yes, these great big concrete piers are what the telescope rests on. And as far as they go above ground, they also extend down below ground. So we're actually on the second floor of the observatory here. We're on the observing room floor. These piers go down through the ground level and then down again into the basement 2 or 3 stories. So the telescope is on this really solid foundation. And that's so important because with something that weighs about 25 tons, the positioning of the telescope has to be super, super stable. Now, a really cool thing that you might see if you were here to visit the telescope is that there is a rubber seal. I know I'm showing you guys pieces of concrete, but it's quite exciting. This rubber gasket that you can see between the pier itself, that's this big blue part, and the floor down below. That rubber gasket is actually designed to insulate the telescope from the rest of the building. So that means if the building, kind of moves around in the wind or in vibrations as a result of passing trains, because we have a train track that passes right near here, it doesn't actually move the telescope at all. The telescope is stable on its concrete piers and it's insulated from the rest of the building. So that's a really cool factor of this telescope, is those concrete piers are the only part that were originally built here on this site, and that telescope, the whole thing, commissioned for this site, but built in Newcastle on Tyne in England, and then shipped here and reassembled. Does that cover it, Chris?
Thanks, Denise. Let me share my screen here. I'm going to show a video that was captured way back when it was under construction. So this is video that you can see. You can find these videos on YouTube of the DDO telescope under construction. There's my player here. Just wind it back. So you can see the University of Toronto dome labeled on here. So this is in England, all assembled, all put together, and then packaged up and brought over here to Canada. Now that all happened, so the telescope opened at the end of May in 1935. That was Dr. Chant's 70th birthday. So they had a big celebration, and the dawn of astronomy in Toronto really was born. Now, something really cool happened, is that when Dr. Chant put the order in for the David Dunlap mirror for the design for the observatory, he knew that there was already a large telescope in Canada in Victoria, British Columbia at the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory. They had a 72-inch diameter reflector telescope at the DAO. So Clarence asked for ours to be 74 inches in diameter, 2 inches larger. So that gives Richmond Hill and the DDO the Canada's largest optical telescope. And when it opened in 1935, there was only one other telescope on the entire planet that was bigger. And that was the 100-inch diameter Hooker telescope in California. And that's the telescope that Edwin Hubble was using to do his analysis and determining the cosmic expansion of the universe and looking at distant galaxies and things like that. So the DDO is venerable. It's been here a long time. One of the things Denise and I will do here shortly is we'll actually walk you around it and show you how we actually use the telescope. So our DDO telescope has not been updated to any great degree. Some of the other sister telescopes, so Grub Parsons actually built a group of these telescopes around the same time, and they're scattered around the world. There's one in Australia that burned a number of years ago. There's one in Japan. There's one in South Africa, all sort of sisters of one another. And some of those telescopes have actually been upgraded over the years so that they're more computerized or operational, more automated, but the DDO telescope never was. In fact, the only thing that we really did is that in the 60s, U of T installed what are called encoders into the axes of the telescope that would report back the position of the optical tube, the big where it's pointing, basically. And that would allow us to actually funnel that data into a little box that lets us assist in pointing it. But our team at RASC Toronto Centre actually have learned how to operate this telescope completely manual. So once the zombie apocalypse comes and we're in the post-apocalyptic time, non-computer age again, we know how to operate this telescope with setting circles and run it that way. So that's kind of fun. I see Denise is up at the inside the telescope now and showing that. So I'll pass it back to Denise.
Can I have a quick question?
Awesome, thank you, Chris.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Has the mirror surface had to be redone ever?
Yes. So the last time the mirror was resurfaced was the long weekend, the May 24 weekend in 2016. And I was here for it. And I will actually show you a picture of that. So just bear with me a second here. Let's see if I have it. Here we go. This way. Share my screen. It took us, let me just go back a bit. It took us 3 days to do it. We were being instructed by a U of T employee who had done it many, many times. And this is actually an etch. You can see this lettering here. This is an etch code that's etched on the surface of the mirror itself. So the mirror is 2 tons of solid Pyrex glass. It's 1 foot thick. You can see this is the mirror after it's been recoated. And if we have time later on, I'll take us downstairs and show you the vacuum chamber where we did the resurfacing. So this is the cell that the mirror sits within. It's resting on 9 pads. You can see 1, 2, 3 in 3 sets of 3. And there's a picture of the mirror taken from underneath it. So this mirrored surface is on the top facing away from us. So yeah. All right, Denise, over to you.
Okay, thank you again so much, Chris. So folks who are seeing my view here, I've got my phone up in the top of the telescope. I'm standing on a platform right now, and I'm looking down the optical tube of the telescope. So what you're seeing at the far end there is in fact the secondary or the primary mirror. If I move over, I'm on a bit of an angle, but if I move over, you'll see my light and me with, with my phone. But yeah, that's the giant primary mirror. So that is a 1-ton piece of glass. It is 2-ton piece of glass. It's about 1 foot thick. And it is 74 inches or 1.88 meters in diameter. The mirror blank is actually a little bit bigger, but they needed to, cut off the outside couple of inches to be able to secure it into place. Oh, I'm just seeing a question come up. Is the mirror honeycombed? No, this is a solid piece of glass. And I know you can't really tell quite how big it is from this vantage point, from this perspective, but Chris is currently climbing the ladder and he's about to go stand in that mirror so that you guys get a really good sense of quite how large this is. So keep in mind, we're talking about, 6'2" here. So you're all going to be able to estimate Chris's height here with him standing, standing in the mirror at this point. So he is at that far end of the optical tube. He is, and he's pointing his camera all over the place. He's at the far end of the optical tube in the primary mirror. Right in front of me here is the mount for the secondary mirror with the spider veins. So if I move around a little bit, you'll see that this round bit here at the end is the secondary mirror. And how big would you say that is, Chris? Is that like 16, 18 inches? He thinks it's 16. Okay. So we're talking about some massive sizes here in terms of the scale of this telescope. It is quite humongous when we are here encountering it in person. And you get a real sense of that when you have humans in the scale of the scope. So Chris was right, absolutely right to stand inside the mirror there, but you can see just the framework of this optical tube, this blue piece of metal here beside me. When I'm standing next to it, I mean, we can't even really fit in the entire framework with me in the in the image. So this is a really huge telescope. And again, it's just such a privilege to be able to come over here and show it to you guys today. We're really excited about it. Okay, back to you, Chris.
So let me share some facts and figures that I'm sure people are dying to know. So the telescope is a reflector telescope, right? With the primary and secondary mirrors. It's a Cassegrain form, which means that the light comes in from infinity through the shutters in the dome, reflects off the primary mirror, goes back to the secondary mirror, and then gets one more time down the tube through a hole in the primary mirror. So it's a bit like your Schmidt-Cassegrain style telescopes, except it doesn't have the corrector plate at the front end. So it's not a Schmidt-Cassegrain, it's just a Cassegrain. So the light travels once, twice, 3 times through the optical tube and comes out the bottom where we mount an eyepiece. So this is the original classic brass eyepiece that is used in the telescope. Of course, it wasn't originally designed as a visual observatory. It was designed to take spectra and photographs and plates, but that eyepiece is what we can use to observe through it. So we have the telescope, and then it has to be counterbalanced by a counterweight for a total of 25 tons of movable mass that rests on those two piers that Denise was showing us a little bit while ago. The focal length of the telescope is 32.5 meters. So that's 32,500 millimeters or 107 feet. So that gives you an idea. If you've got a telephoto lens on your camera, that gives you a sense of that. So 32,000 millimeter focal length lens, essentially. So the field of view is very, very tiny. It's actually in the Cassegrain form or format, it's f17.3. Focal ratio of f17.3. Now, there was the ability, or is the ability, to swap out the secondary mirror for a 45-degree diagonal and turn it into a true Newtonian telescope. And that's the way Helen Sawyer Hogg used to use it, and we can talk a bit more about Helen Hogg in a little while. But that would, of course, reduce the focal ratio and make it a wider field telescope. But basically, when we're looking at objects of the telescope, we can basically fit Jupiter and maybe two of the moons if they're close enough. So it's really, really zoomed in. If we want to look at the moon, we just get one or two craters. We can't really get a pull back and get a nice field of view. The whole observatory runs on DC power, except for the computers and the other things we're using here. We have AC lines in, but the telescope was designed to run on 110 volts DC. And originally that was done with a power converter in the basement. And then that was later changed to a solid state control system that U of T put in. The dome we haven't talked about. Denise, can you show the dome very well from where you are? So the dome is actually 80 tons and it rotates a full 360. And it rolls on 24 steel or metal train wheels. And those are actuated by a cable system that wraps all the way around the perimeter of the dome and then heads down into the basement where it hooks onto a pulley and a gear that rotates and basically pulls the cable, and then that rotates the whole dome. So I think we could actually rotate the dome. Not sure. Are you safe? Okay. We'll do that. We'll make sure we do that once Denise is down and back in the safe zone. Yeah. So I'm going to get out of the way and let Denise move the telescope. So I said that the telescope, the glass mirror is 2 tons. Combining with the mirror cell and the optical tube, it's about 12.5 tons. But it's so well balanced that Denise can.
Yeah, let me switch my view here.
Can you tip up your camera slightly, Chris? Tip up your camera slightly.
Okay, I'm trying to see myself here. Here I
there
am
we go.
down
Thanks,
in by the end of the telescope here, the opening of the optical tube. And what I can do is literally with one hand, I don't know if you guys can see this, maybe the other way is better.
We can see you from Chris's view.
With one hand. Okay, you can see me from Chris's view. Fantastic. So here I am, and I'm just going to grab the bottom edge of this optical tube, and I'm going to say, hello, everybody. Here we go. The whole telescope moves up. This is one hand, guys, one hand.
She's got her phone in the other hand, so she's not lying here. You can see it.
Yeah. So I'm clearly a superhero. It's that well balanced. Yep.
Unmute yourself, Chris.
So we can orient the telescope by hand. It's so well balanced. And in fact, we'll get Denise to unlock the right ascension axis and rotate it east to west a little bit. So the telescope is equatorially mounted. It's permanently fixed aligned to the north celestial pole of the Earth, as you could see. This axis, let me get that. So that heavy axis here is aligned to the north celestial pole of Earth, and that allows us to keep the telescope aligned precisely to the sky. So Denise is actually moving the telescope in the north direction, so the celestial north-south direction. And what you're getting a view of above my head here is the spectrograph. Because the spectrograph is mounted to the base of the telescope mirror cell. And that's what was used to collect the spectrum of various stars and things like that. We can talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. All right. How about a little east-west motion? And then we'll show everybody the setting circle.
I'll walk out, so hopefully people can get a better view, and I'll walk around with my camera.
Yeah, so Denise is manually rotating the telescope westerly right now. And one of the things about a telescope of this vintage is that there are no safety features. So there's nothing preventing her from crashing the end of the telescope into an obstacle that's part of the dome structure or one of the piers. So when we're operating these telescopes, we have to train our operators to be extremely careful about monitoring both the top and the bottom end of the telescope. And we also generally operate with a buddy system so that we have two people monitoring at once and making sure that we don't do anything wrong. The other thing, you just heard that buzzing sound. That was Denise re-engaging the clutches to lock the telescope in its right ascension. And if we didn't do that, there's nothing preventing it from just continuing to crash over, flop over on one side. So it's, again, 25 tons of mass. So there's Samantha showing the view over her shoulder. Yeah. So maybe Samantha, you could show the eyepiece, where the eyepiece goes.
Sure. Where are we going?
So right above your head. There we go. So there's a handle. So when we have when we're doing viewers visiting the DDO, then those guests will climb the ladder if necessary to the right height, and they can grab that handle and won't move the telescope. It's just too heavy to move it. So that's where the eyepiece goes in that that opening, that sort of.
The closer view with
yeah.
the where it is relative to that.
All right, so why don't we talk a little bit about the setting circles. So sky coordinates operate in astronomy using declination degrees for north and south, and right ascension in hours, minutes, and seconds for east and west, with a 0 to 24-hour circle to go all the way around from one and start again, all the way east and all the way around to the part where you pick up again. So Denise is actually showing you the big right ascension setting circle, which actually has hours labeled on it in numerals, and then all those subticks are the minutes. And there are just different lengths so that we can know whether we're 5-minute increments or 1-minute increments. And now she's showing you the counterweight. So that blue structure Denise is pointing up to is the counterweight, the counterbalancing weight for the telescope. And there's a window in it. And in the window, there is a dial with the degrees and degree markers and the minute markers for the north-south coordinate system. And so if we were to operate the telescope while you were looking at the numbers, you'd see the dials run down.
Do you want to do that, Chris?
Yeah, so what I can do is I'll grab the handle and we'll move the telescope.
So while Chris is grabbing the hand controller, I will just point at the declination coordinate and you guys will see as they move, hopefully. All right. Yep.
There we go. So That's moving the telescope north. I don't know if you can see the, if you pin Denise's view, you might be able to see the dial rotating. So the way that we look up to point it to an object is we have to use something like Stellarium or Sky Safari, an app, or you could use a Sky Atlas and you could look at the coordinate system for the object that you're chasing. But before you do that, you actually have to align the telescope to the local night sky. And the way we do that is we set the telescope back up to its original home location. So it's actually lowered a little bit down, and it's facing exactly north-south. Right now it's been moved off north-south. And we put it at what's called a 0-hour angle, so that the east and west are exactly level. And what we do is we look up the local sidereal time, which is varying, every second. And we dial that into one of the verniers on the bottom of the big right ascension setting circle. We actually do that, let's say, a minute ahead of time. And then we have one of us count down, and at the exact time that the minute arrives, the 0 seconds arrives, we flick on the power switch. Now, Denise is showing you in the background, that's the little motor. That little motor is all you need to use to track the motion of the Earth, to track the sky, the sky as it rotates due to the rotation of the Earth. It's so well balanced that it's basically no bigger than, say, a washing machine motor. So Denise, you want to flick it on? I'll mute myself.
So you can probably hear the noise of this running.
So you're looking at basically the transmission, if you like, of the right ascension drive system, and I can actually control that. I go over to the other controller. Let me just grab the other controller. So these are our fine motor controls. So the one you saw me having before was the gross or fast motion control. This is the one you'd use for fine movements. And so I can take the rocker switch and I could make it run faster in east-west, or I could slow it down and reverse it. You can see the window in the transmission, how it varies. There's also a slow motion control for the north-south. But the north-south, it's using what's called the tangent arm. I don't know if we can get a shot of the tangent arm, but we'll try to do that for you. So maybe we'll kill the motor, and then we'll take some questions, and then we'll talk a little bit about the discoveries.
Okay, let's go on to some questions. One thing you can't tell on the camera is it's actually freezing in here. So that's why we're all bundled up.
Yeah. Gloves.
Yeah, I forgot my gloves. So do you have any dew issues, and how do you control it? That's our first question.
So the observatory is never heated. And so when it's 20 below in February outside, it's also 20 below in the observing floor. We actually have stopped operating the giant telescope when it gets below about -10 and colder, because, it's older and we don't want to stress any of the metal or fatigue anything. So we typically try not to use it when it's extremely cold. But so when it's cold and crisp outside, it's also cold and crisp inside. On the other hand, though, when things start to get warm in the springtime, we can get fog in here. We can get, because the two piers that the telescope sits on, the two legs, go so deep into the hill below us that they stay cold much longer. And so when the air starts getting warmer, they actually remain cold and they start sweating. And so we get a lot of water dripping inside the observatory from that point of view. Yeah, we actually have water on the floor today. So the other thing is that there's no rubber gasket or anything on the shutters. So the two shutters open side to side to allow us to view outside. And so we actually can get some precipitation dripping down between the two panels of the shutters. You can see the shutter line running up down through Denise's view right now. Yeah. Good question. Anything else?
There's 3 more questions. They're all coming in hot and heavy now. So,
Good.
why won't you add a camera with a narrowband filter? It will not be able to capture the broadband targets, but it'd be able to be used for imaging despite the light pollution. And what do we have for imaging on this telescope right now?
Okay, so the field of view in the antique eyepiece is, I think it's a few arc minutes. It's like a couple arc minutes, a few arc minutes. So putting a camera on it, for example, if you're looking at it, most galaxies will not fit. You'll just see the core of the galaxy. The M13 globular cluster, for example, is too big for the DDO telescope. You can't really tell you're looking at a globular cluster. But M92 in Hercules is about half the size and it fits a little bit nicer. Or if we're looking at, say, Albireo, the double star, it fits nicely in the field of view. So you can see we have guests come up and look to the telescope. So when we have, I shouldn't mention, when we have public programming, we actually line people up at night. We have the lights off and we point at a target and we keep it on that target and everybody gets to climb the ladder and look at the object, look at the target, one after the other. We don't let people take photos though, because it just takes too long and it's not possible to get people through their turn. We do have plans. So we have done public live streaming. We do programs where we do live streaming from the DDO telescope and views through it. And so we've been working with the Malincam system and we've had a few people attach their DSLR. And so it does work and it's great. For public programs, it's not as much fun not to climb up and actually look with your Mark I eyeballs. But if you have a bigger group or an event that's happening, it's nice to broadcast views through it. Like the Mars opposition 2 years ago, we did live stream views of Mars through the big telescope, which was really cool. So yeah, but again, you're restricted by your field of view. So don't imagine you're going to get the North America Nebula or anything like that because it's just too big.
I can't imagine. We have similar issues with our 16-inch telescope.
Denise had a point.
Yeah,
Denise, go ahead.
Chime in with this? So one of the factors to consider with this telescope, Chris was talking about the field of view and how it makes it difficult to see larger targets. That is 100% true, but also consider that even when you're looking through a small telescope on nights that are, hot and humid with a turbulent atmosphere, you get a lot of movement in your target as you're observing. Imagine that magnified hundreds of times, and you get an idea of what the view through the eyepiece can be like here at this telescope. Because yes, as much as it magnifies our targets, it also magnifies any kind of air movement. So the seeing is exacerbated, and oftentimes when we do acquire a target with this, we see it bouncing around and shimmering in and out of focus just because of that.
So that kind of leads to the next question. Sorry, I'm hiding from the heater in there. It's a little loud. Does it use any things like us amateur astronomers use, like guiding through a camera tracking a star or PEC training? Simple answer is no. Chris?
No, I use the universal symbol for no. No, it doesn't. But in the days when it was being used for scientific research, it would be tracked. The PEC corrections would be a human being. So it'd be manually adjusted during an exposure using the slow motion controls that I was mentioning before. So yeah, not as advanced as the modern telescopes. In fact, when we do public programs, we do let people line up and look through this telescope, but then we send them outside to all the rascals that have their best fantastic telescopes on the lawn. And then they can show people a variety of views, usually with a much better view.
So that kind of goes on to the next question, which was asking about how do we focus? And I'm going to go along with this. Also, do we need to collimate the telescope? And how do we do it if we do have to do that?
So the telescope can be collimated, but it's kind of a lost art on this telescope. So we're kind of living with it as it is. There are collimation screws on the behind the secondary mirror, up where Denise was a little while ago. And there are even adjustments to center the 2-ton glass primary in itself. But since we're not doing research, we really aren't messing with that right now. But yeah, we could do it. Sorry, what was the other part of the question? Focusing, yeah. So the telescope is focused by moving the secondary mirror. There's actually a worm and gear system that actually moves the secondary mirror, forwards and backwards along the OTA to focus the telescope.
And I'm showing the switch.
Yeah, that'll switch above the tape. Yeah, there's a switch, so it's focus. Pull the mirror out, pull and push the mirror in. Those are our focus controls. Anything else?
So 2 more, but I think one was a comment. Small, dense nebulae, like the owl M97, must look really nice. That was a comment.
Yes.
The other one was.
So let me just elaborate on that a second.
Okay.
Yeah. The benefit of a 74-inch aperture telescope is that when you're viewing objects, they're in color. So none of this black and white ring nebula, you're getting the ring nebula's colors when you're seeing gathered through a 74 inches of aperture. So some of the best objects to look at in the 74-inch would be things like planetary nebulas, blue snowball, and so on, the smaller ones, because you'll see them in color. And globular clusters, you'll see the blue stars and the yellow stars quite readily.
So a couple more and then we can move on. I'm just going to answer Hugo's question. We do have to, back in 2016, we redid the mirror surface, which Chris described earlier. So the mirror does have to be maintained over the years. And Terry said, have we ever considered moving it to Sudbury or North Bay where you can get a much darker sky? I'd be terrified to move this thing, if I'm being honest, considering those pictures we saw. But it's just now, is it just a historical place, Chris?
So the dome was completed after the telescope was installed. So it's basically lowered into the partially completed dome and then finished building around it. So you'd have to dismantle a lot to move the telescope. The reason, so U of T no longer owns the observatory. It was sold in, I think, 2016. Yeah, around 2016 or so. It was sold to a land developer, and they actually put houses on about half the property. But the environment around the DDO itself is preserved. It's a historical heritage site now, so it can't be developed. But the money that U of T collected went to found the Dunlap Institute at U of T, and the Dunlap Institute do lots of public outreach in astronomy. They're a great outfit. But basically what was happening is that with the advent of the internet and the ease of international travel, Canadian astronomers were able to use big telescopes in Chile and Hawaii and other places. So, and by the way, it's not clear that many nights in Toronto, maybe 40, 50 nights a year that are clear here. Whereas you can get a place with a telescope where it's rarely cloudy. So you get a lot more work done.
That's why the RASC telescope is in California.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, we're going to quickly finish up the questions so we can chat a little bit more. But the maintenance schedule, do we have a schedule of the maintenance? And who is in charge of keeping this whole place up to date and running?
So the city of Richmond Hill owns the observatory now. And we're RASC Toronto Centre and another group called the DDO Defender Group are partners with Richmond Hill to offer astronomy outreach and education using the observatory. And so Richmond Hill are responsible for the upkeep and maintenance. They recently, this past year, they completely sandblasted and repainted the exterior of the dome. So it's beautiful and white, including the admin building, which is the other structure here, has 3 domes on its roof, and 2 of them have telescopes. One is operational and one is empty, and the other is sort of defunct. So they're in charge of all that. And they're doing improvements. They actually took every window out of the admin building, the wooden windows, and reglazed them all and restored them. And they're really putting a lot of emphasis on the envelope of the building. So, making sure that the elements can't get inside and preserving the outside. And then once that's done over time, then they'll work some more on the interior stuff. So you can see that the telescope could use some paint. It's a bit like a battleship where once you finish painting it, it's ready to start over again at the other end. But because, it's an optical instrument, we don't really mess with it too much in the way of paint and cleaning and that kind of thing. We just sort of leave it be mostly.
So I guess the next couple of questions will lead into what we wanted to talk about as well, is you were getting people really excited about coming to see this thing in person, doing our nights again, or in general, the outreach that happens at the DDO. We also have a question about how Saturn looks in there that's been asked a couple times. So I'd like to answer that one as well.
Saturn looks amazing, but it will be swimming. As Denise said, we get a lot of seeing limitations in the telescope. But you can see the belts on Jupiter and everything. It's really, really neat. And we were getting markings on Mars without any problem. If we have time, I might be able to share a bit of video that we collected for Mars a little while ago. So what was the other? What can people do to visit?
Yeah, do we have an opening plan? What can they do right now? How can they see this more?
So I'm going to share a website, and Denise is going to talk over some of the things you can do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Chris. So yeah, great question. How can we visit the observatory? Well, during the pandemic, it has not been so easy because, of course, we've been limited in terms of bringing people to this site. But the partners with the City of Richmond Hill have been working on reopening. So there are currently some in-person events that are in fact happening here at the observatory. But there are also many virtual events. So if you want to do more things like this, where you get to have a quick tour of the observatory and see some video shot through the telescope, then you can certainly check out those events. You can find the events hosted by RASC on the RASC website. So that's rascto.ca. And Chris has brought up the Richmond Hill DDO programs page. So, he's just navigated away from it. So,
we also usually post on our online
pages. Yeah, these two pages are the kind of ideal spots to go to. So you'll see that the Richmond Hill DDO page has the astronomy series of events, including things like astronomy speakers nights, family nights, Up in the Sky, which is a type of virtual family night. And then of course, there are some crafting days and experiences for kids if you have family members who are small and want to come try out some fun astrocrafts or space fun. Those are some great programs to attend. But of course, the RASC webpage of Chris, if you want to go over to there, has a calendar of events that includes all of these events and more that are offered by RASC Toronto Centre. So we've got a whole bunch of things lined up. The DDO events are always marked as DDO events. And then of course, there's a whole bunch of other RASC Toronto Centre events, RASC national events, all listed on that site. I hope that answers that question.
Also, rasc.ca/online, that online calendar you might be used to going to. I am very experienced with posting them because they always have events going and they're all well planned in advance. It's under, I'm pretty sure, RASC DDO, and any event that has that in the title is hosted for the David Dunlap Observatory as well, which will be the same events. Often you'll find it RASC Toronto or on the Richmond Hill site, but just another place that you're used to navigate to and find out more.
Yeah, for now we're still doing virtual because the Toronto Centre hasn't yet elected to go back to in-person programming. So none of our public stargazing parties or anything like that are running yet. The other thing to bear in mind is that because there's only one entrance and one exit to the dome, those blue doors that I showed you at the beginning, the fire marshal has mandated that we can only have 35 human beings in the dome at any given time. So generally we sell a limited number of tickets so that we can allow all those people to get up and see the dome, minus the few RASC volunteers that we have running the scope at the time. And there are times, sometimes we'll do maybe a double header type of thing where we have an early session and a later session. The summer months, of course, it doesn't get dark until late. So some of our programs in the summertime really aren't rolling until 10 p.m., 9:30, 10 p.m. for purposes of getting views to the big scope when it gets dark later. Any other questions?
I think those are all the questions we've had right now. A lot of questions about what things we can see. Can we see the ISS? I'd imagine the ISS is almost moving too fast for us to catch it.
You could do it in theory, but again, the field of view is so narrow, your error bars are really, really tiny. Let's talk a little bit about the discoveries that have been done with the David Dunlap Observatory telescope. Denise, you want to talk about Tom Bolton?
Yeah, sure. I can do that. Unmute here. Okay. So, hello again, everyone. I've unmuted now. So yes, this telescope has been used in research by folks at the University of Toronto since it opened in 1935 until it was sold in, what did you say again, Chris, 2016? So, somewhere around there. So this telescope was used and has made several significant discoveries. I think I'm going to start with the Helen Hogg stories. How's that, Chris? The Helen Hogg? Yeah. So one of the first astronomers who worked in this facility was Helen Sawyer Hogg. And I know you guys can see, I don't know if you can see up there that there's a platform. You'll run up? Okay, Chris is gonna run up and give us the show. So Helen Sawyer Hogg was studying globular clusters, and she was studying the Cepheid variable stars in globular clusters, because these are a particular type of star which, as they brighten and dim, they have a known brightness. Their brightness can be calculated, their true brightness, which means that we can determine how far away they are. So she was up in the telescope taking photos of these Cepheid variable stars for many, many nights. And this is back in the days when we didn't have digital cameras. She was using a camera that had glass photographic plates, that used glass photographic plates. And so she would be standing up in this platform. Now this platform is on a bridge that does move, so it can be moved to align with the end of the telescope, which is where the camera would be mounted in alignment with the secondary mirror. So she would stand up there. Chris, can you wave? Okay, so everybody can see Chris waving up there, fantastic. She would stand up there taking her photographs, and we all saw how long it took Chris to go walking up all of the stairs to get up there. Well, in the interest of saving time, because let's face it, you can only take so many photos, right, in the course of a night, and she was a woman on a mission. So in the interest of saving time, rumor has it that she would lower down the used photographic plate in her purse from this little, crow's nest, if you will, up here, and she would lower it all the way down on a rope to the observing floor, where an assistant would swap it out for a fresh plate and take the other one off to be developed. And then she would raise it up again and start taking photos once again. And of course, her work, her research contributed to our understanding of the scope of our galaxy, because by determining the distances to some of these distant stars, we were able to understand a bit better just how large our galaxy is. So that's a really fantastic contribution to science. And that was back in the 1930s. Another important research that has been research contribution that was made here is that this is actually the telescope that gave us the very first evidence, mind you, of the existence of black holes. So in the 1960s, the university, in the 1960s, people started sending rockets into space. And they started noticing that there are X-ray sources in space that can't be seen from Earth, because of course our atmosphere filters out a lot of the X-rays that are coming from space. So they started doing research where they sent up rockets to sort of try and map where are some of these X-ray sources coming from. And they did find that there is a very strong X-ray source in the constellation Cygnus. So of course, being super original, scientists of the day called it Cygnus X1 because it was the X-ray source in Cygnus. And they had no idea what it was. It was a dark spot. There was nothing that was obviously there, no stars, but it was emitting massive amounts of X-rays. So people started studying this area. And one of the researchers who was studying this area was Tom Bolton, who was associated with the University of Toronto. And what he observed was a star nearby, not the X-ray source itself, but a very nearby star. And he started watching that star and observed that it was doing something pretty wild. So he was taking photographs of that star, or rather measuring its spectra using a spectrograph like the one that we have attached to the end of the telescope today. And his observation with the spectrograph, we can see the spectra of the star. And so we can see things like whether it's red shifted or blue shifted. And these indications tell us, is the star moving away from us or towards us? And so what he observed was that this star near the Cygnus X1 source was moving back and forth quickly, much more quickly than it would if it was just, a random star with no other influences on it. And so what he determined was, what he was observing was the radial velocity of the star moving toward Earth and then away from Earth as it orbited. We can't detect the sort of side-to-side motion of a star so easily, but through observing the spectra, we can tell whether it's moving toward or away from us. And so what he just determined was that it was moving very quickly around something that was not emitting any light, but emitting massive amounts of X-rays. Now, prior to that, there had been theories about the existence of black holes. This was the first evidence that supported those theories. So this is this telescope's, one of its claims to fame is that it gave us the first evidence of the existence of black holes. So those were a couple of the important contributions to science made by this telescope. There have been many more, of course. Okay, Chris, back to you.
Thank you. So if you're interested, you can actually observe the blue giant star that Tom Bolton was taking the spectrum of. I've got it indicated on this slide. It's near the brighter star Eta Cygni. The star is, let's see if I wrote the name, I think it's B135 Sig. But we can actually bring that up again maybe when we do a summertime insider's guide, and we can give people instructions on how to see that actual star for themselves. Not the black hole, but the one that's tugging around. Let's see, what else can we share with? The DDO is so iconic that it's actually been used as a filming location. And so if you've watched the Umbrella Academy, you've visited the DDO in the past. So this is actually a clip from, I'm not sure if this is Umbrella Academy. This might be another show called, what was it called? I forget its name. I have to look it up. But anyway, October Faction. There's another show on Netflix called October Faction that recorded here. The show Warehouse 13 was here. The show Hannibal was here. The TV show Hannibal is not safe for kids, not safe for work. But if you do want to look up DDO episode, Prime DDO episode, it's season 2, episode 5 for Hannibal. And for the Umbrella Academy, season 1, episode 6. If you'd want to see the DDO in all its glory. And they usually doctor the DDO up with, matte paintings around it to make it look even more impressive than it already is. In the show Hannibal, the admin building, which you're seeing here on the right-hand side, was the Baltimore Hospital for the Criminally Insane. So what they did is they actually chopped off the domes on the roof so you couldn't see there were domes on the roof of the observatory. Let's see what else I've got in here. Here's a view from Umbrella Academy. And here's some other views. So I'll stop here. So what I thought I'd do now is in our last few minutes is I'll walk around and I'll show you the chamber downstairs, the vacuum chamber where we re-illuminize the mirror, and maybe even step outside and show you the ellipse and the admin building. Any other questions?
Just a quick question. Where can we see, is there a place that they have this historical data, the photos or spectra recordings from the DDO? Is there, that was a question from somebody in our Q&A.
Yeah, I don't have it at my fingertips, but all of the research and papers that were published by Helen Hogg and other astronomers at U of T are all in the astrophysical journals, and many of them can be looked up. The Journal of the RASC has been around for, almost 100 years, I think, by now, since the early 1900s. And it actually, its scans of its early volumes are hosted by the Smithsonian. And again, if you ask us in a future session, I can maybe look that up and share that with folks. All right, I'm gonna step away from this computer and I'm gonna get on my phone and walk around a little bit. And Denise, you can tackle any questions that Samantha has.
I can give Denise one that she can answer. What is the best thing you've seen through this telescope?
That is a great question. I think the most impressive thing that I've seen through this telescope, there are two. Okay, there are two. The first one is the very first thing I saw through this telescope, because there is nothing like a first view through a telescope this big. And the first thing that I ever saw through this telescope was actually the double star Albireo. So for those of you who know, Albireo is a star in the constellation Cygnus. And to the naked eye, it just looks like a single star. However, when you look at it through a telescope, you can see it's actually two stars. And one of them is a beautiful golden color, and the other one is a bright, bright blue. It's absolutely brilliant. When I looked at it through this telescope, they looked like little suns. And I was just so amazed that stars could look so bright and so brilliant and so massive in many ways as well. So that's the first one. The second one is the night that I saw the Ring Nebula through this telescope, because of course, so often when we look at those Messier objects, when we look at planetary nebulas, they're little fuzzy gray blobs, right? But when we look at it through a telescope this large, we can actually see color. And let me tell you, the Ring Nebula in color is spectacular. So those are my favorite two, I have to say.
I need to come back here when it's open. I really want to see these things.
Wonderful.
So we have Chris taking a little walk outside. As you can see, it's snowy here. And he will be showing us, I'm going to pin his video. There's the beautiful dome. I'll let you take it.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. You're good.
Good, good. I tried to show you the illuminizing chamber in the main floor, but the dome is a Faraday cage, so the cell signal got chopped off. So I had to exit the building to reconnect to the signal. So this is the admin building. You can see we've got 3 domes on the roof. So the north dome is empty. It actually contained, I think it was an 8-inch refractor, brass refractor telescope that's currently in the Museum of Science in Ottawa. So that dome is empty. The southern dome has a telescope that was handmade, sort of a mini version of the 74-inch telescope. It was made by R.K. Young in 1926. And it's an equatorially mounted Cassegrain reflector that actually works. It's a 19-inch aperture mirror, so we've used that one. And then the dome in the middle actually has a 26-inch telescope, but the electronics in the drive system are kind of Apollo era vintage, and so they're not operational right now. And so what we need is some you know, maybe some aspiring engineers to connect with Richmond Hill to get it up and running again. But so that, yeah, that's the admin building. So I'm actually going to wander back in and we'll finish up with some last questions. Hey.
You get both views. It's a beautiful site. I can see why so many places, like shows, have chosen this as a place to film.
And we have deer wandering the property and the odd coyote and things like that. It's kind of an urban, really nice urban natural park.
I see Denise might be connected to Wi-Fi. Let's see if she can get into the room.
Maybe, yeah, maybe she can.
Oh, you're both following.
Yeah, sorry. So I am now, we're under the big scope. So let's actually give us some context here. Oh, I can hear myself on Chris's phone. Chris, could you unlock that door? So if you can see this giant blue section of wall, this is the bottom of the south pillar. So that, that pier that we were seeing upstairs that the telescope was resting on, that's it right there. So again, that goes right down into the ground a couple of stories. And I'm walking into the back here and I want to just show you guys, I hope I don't lose my signal, but I wanted to show you guys, here we have one of the generator, the power converters. So this converts from AC to DC power that was, this was used, I think in the 60s, but we are not using it anymore. We have a whole system of electronics here that, that helps convert the power. And to keep all of the relays warm, we have an antique light bulb. This has been burning since the 1930s, as far as we know. So it's pretty impressive. We were talking about the dome rotation earlier, and you guys can see this pulley system.
I'll go up and turn the dome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Chris is gonna go up and turn the dome. This pulley system is actually, this is the dome motor. So this motor controls the dome rotation upstairs. And hopefully Chris will also show us the dome rotating at the same time. But these pulleys will start to move in just a minute here as he rotates the dome. And you guys will see that, that's what is making, oh, there they go. So this is a noisy process, which is why I stopped speaking there.
So if you look into Chris's video, which I hopefully both have them pinned, I've been playing back and forth, you can see the dome moving and then you can see the pulleys. And you can hear it in the background of mine too.
Yeah, that was great, Chris. Thank you. So yeah, we can see all of those things moving all at once. So that's our pulley system and the dome motor that controls the motion of the dome. I'm going to scoot around the back here, around the back of the north pier. So this giant, what looks like a wall, is actually not a wall. It is the north pier. That's what the telescope is resting on. And we will go around this side. With luck, I won't lose a Wi-Fi signal. And you guys will see the aluminizing chamber, the vacuum chamber. So this is it right here. This is the vacuum chamber. When we need to re-illuminize the mirror, I will explain this process really quickly. There is an elevator here, and that panel in the floor upstairs, that's a panel in the floor upstairs that opens up. And the telescope basically needs to be stood on its end so that the mirror section is as close to the ground as possible. The mirror is removed from the telescope and it's lowered down in this elevator. And there are a number of like crane systems. You guys can see that there's a crane system up there to move stuff around. We have to crane this vacuum chamber cover off of its current position. The mirror goes inside. And it's cleaned. So there's a whole bunch of, there's a whole process to clean the mirror off. in terms of using some solvents and things to remove the previous coating. And then we have to put on a new coating. And how that's done is on the inside of each of these numbered knobs, on the inside of the vacuum chamber, they have a corresponding sort of knob, and we hook on little aluminum coils. And these have to be pristinely clean. You cannot use them if they're dirty, so if you drop one, it's done. And they get hooked onto the inside. The vacuum chamber cover is put back on over the mirror that's been freshly cleaned. And then all of the air gets pumped out, okay? So we use the vacuum system to remove all of the air, and then we get to illuminize. And how we do that is we electrify each of those little aluminum coils in sequence. So this is why they have numbers. They're electrified in sequence, they're atomized, and then the aluminum dust settles essentially onto the mirror. And in a vacuum, that makes a perfectly smooth surface so that we have a nice shiny mirror surface and with, you know, no dirt, no particles, no bumps, none of that. And then the whole process happens in reverse. You have to add air back into the vacuum chamber. We have to raise the lid. We have to get it back, get the mirror back into the elevator, and it's a hand crank elevator. We got to crank it back up into the second story and then replace the mirror into the telescope. So it's an enormous process that involves many people and many hours of work. So there you go. I'm glad we could get down here and show you guys that.
Thank you, Denise. That's great.
No worries.
Okay, we've only got a couple minutes left. Any last questions?
We have a quick question about are the counterweights or tension system with the dome motor?
So yeah, you saw beside the motor, there was a big set of weights hanging down. They just keep the tension on the cable. And you may have seen all these little orange, those are all counterweights as well on the telescope itself.
One more question. How much does that mirror weigh and who lifts it?
So the mirror is 2 tons. And when we take it all apart, there's actually, we use the hole in the center of the mirror that makes it a Cassegrain telescope to put a hook up through the center, and then we lift the hook and we can transport the mirror very, very carefully into the vacuum chamber.
And do we have to do that often, or is it like how often do we have to redo the illuminizing?
A normal sized telescope in a professional observatory might do it every year or two. And they usually pick a full moon night. And then there'll be people who are so well trained at it that it'll only take them 24 hours before it's back in operation again. But I don't think the DDOs will get done again for the foreseeable future. There's a fair bit of expense and time involved to do it.
So I think we have reached the time. Someone wants to know about your hat, Denise. What kind of hat you're wearing? But we have so when you're up here, you can answer that. But in general, we're getting really congratulations and terrific presentation. Thank you. I would like to say to Denise for allowing us to visit and hosting us and being able to join us. Your knowledge and camera skills of walking around the telescope really made this so much more special.
No problem. I'm happy to do it.
So we'll be back in 2 weeks when we're going to talk about more Messiers, actually the Messier Marathon concept, and we'll tackle another big hunk of the spring Messier targets so that people can get those all observed.
Yeah, so stick around and get ready with your Messiers because the Messier Marathon is coming up soon. So thank you all.
And a big thanks to Samantha for joining us today too. Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you. I wanted to come here. It was an excuse to come here this afternoon. So I'm very happy to be invited. It was worth the drive down from Waterloo. Okay. Fantastic. So thank you all.
Keep
Peace,
looking
guys.
up.
Bye.